Hey guys, what's going on, and welcome back to What Shall We Do Next. And today I thought it would be fun to do a little psychology lesson on me and try to get to the root of my problems and try to figure out what happened to me in my life during my childhood that made me end up like this, with all of this stuff right here. What went wrong during my upbringing to make me end up like this? With all this horror stuff and being so obsessed with horror movies and stuff like that. And the reason I'm doing this video, I got this idea from Charlie from Penguin Zero here on YouTube, or Moist Critical. A lot of you guys will probably know him. He's just recently hit 10 million subscribers, so he's pretty big. But a while ago, he made a video talking about a movie that traumatized him as like I guess like an early teen. And for Charlie to admit being so scared of something, it was kind of weird to me, because if you guys watch him, you will know that he's not afraid of anything. He doesn't get afraid of it. He does a lot of horror gameplay, doesn't get afraid of anything, does reactions to like horror videos, and he just jokes around and makes light of it, makes fun of it. So to see him be so scared of a movie got me thinking, like, because you guys know me, I'm not afraid of horror movies either. Like, I cry watching horror movies because I feel sad, because I'm such an empath. And I feel so bad for, like, I get attached to one of the characters, and then when something bad happens to them or they die at the end, it literally makes me sad. I get sad from watching horror movies. It's like the opposite of scared. But it really made me think back to like my childhood, and I was thinking, like, what is a movie that actually really scared me? And I did see the one Charlie was talking about was One Missed Call, and I did see that when I was a kid, and I did think it was very scary back then. But that's not the one that traumatized me. The one that traumatized me, and if you guys watch it to this day, like, as like, I don't know, I mean, probably if you were born after the 2000s and you're used to the horror movies that we have today, this movie's gonna seem like child's play to you. It's not gonna be scary at all. But for me, it was the scariest fucking thing ever, and it was House on Haunted Hill. That movie genuinely scared the actual fucking dookie out of my ass. Like, it was the scariest thing that I've ever seen, and I remember watching it multiple times. I didn't just watch it once and learn my lesson. I watched it multiple times. I used to fake being sick on a Friday so I could go home from school, and then when I got home from school, I remember sitting there eating soup and watching House on Haunted Hill because we had the VHS of it. And I used to, like, that night though, like, I would watch it and I'd be kind of like, oh, this is fun, I love watching a scary movie. But then the nighttime comes, and when I'm laying in bed, I would still remember certain things from the movie, and those things from the movie still kind of fuck me up today when I think back to it. It's crazy, and I'm not afraid of anything. Like, you guys know I talk about like horror movies, and I'm super passionate about them, but I don't get afraid of them. It's crazy, and I think the reason for that is because when I watched that movie, it scared me so bad. It was like that one lethal dose of horror that nothing ever affected me after that. Like, I was immune to horror movies after that. And I think that could be why I'm not afraid of horror movies. Like, they could make anything, and no matter how high the budget or whatever, it won't scare me. I really believe it has something to do with that movie, because I remember being genuinely shit scared watching House on Haunted Hill. And a couple of the scenes that I remember, I'll try not to do any spoilers, but just in case, spoiler alert. Well, first of all, here's a fun fact. When I was in Florida, I went on the Hulk roller coaster at the time. I think it was called Hulk. I think they've changed it now. But at the time I went, it was Hulk. And that roller coaster was actually in this movie, House on Haunted Hill, at the beginning of the movie. But there's a couple of scenes that I want to mention that still kind of, oh, I don't know, man. It's like, it feels so fucking dark and weird to think back to. And one of the scenes that I really, like, stands out to me, I guess I would have to watch it again, just to, like, relive it. But there's one scene, and I think I've mentioned this not that long ago, but there's one scene with a girl, I don't remember her name, but she's walking down this like hallway, and she's like taking pictures on a Polaroid camera. Oh, not a Polaroid. It was like a camcorder, because it had like I remember it had like the little LCD screen on the side. And she's like recording this like old dilapidated building, and she's going around like the basement part. And it used to be, I guess, a hotel, not a hotel, a hospital, like years before. And she's like filming, and it's like a night vision kind of color, and she points the camera into this one room, and she sees these doctors and nurses and they're like performing surgery on someone, and the person's like strapped to the table, and like, or I think it was an asylum, not a hospital, but they're like doing some kind of like lobotomy on this person, and he's like screaming and stuff. And the doctor himself was like super creepy. He had these like round glasses like this, and a mustache, and he just looked really like what you would expect like an old-fashioned mad scientist to look like. And she like sees them on the camcorder, but when she looks up with her eyes, they're not there. It's just an old like abandoned room with the surgery, the operating table, just like with webs all over it, and you could see it had been like left for years. But when she picked the camera back up and looked through the camera, they were there again. And then suddenly the doctors and nurses all suddenly stop at the same time and look directly at her. And I fucking used to think that was the scariest thing ever. But that wasn't all, because right after that she hears a noise coming from behind her, and she turns down, looks down the hallway, and off to the right, and I remember this so fucking vividly, off to the right you could see like half standing out of a doorway was like this weird like mutant creature, humanoid shaped figure just standing there, like the silhouette, and it's kind of like half peeping out like this. The next thing, it just like comes super fast down the hallway, and it does that thing that I've seen them do this in a few movies where it's like it does like that and the head like jitters really fast, and it makes like a disturbing noise, and then the girl screams, and that's the end of the scene. But I remember that sound, the sound effect, the way the creature came, the head movement. It was fucking traumatizing to me. And the doctors and nurses thing. There's another movie called Grave Encounters, where they go like with a night vision camera. It's like a found footage style movie, and they go looking around this like abandoned hospital. And there's a scene in Grave Encounters, or Grave Encounters 2, one of them, where like they're hiding in like a closet or a cupboard or something, and they're looking out through the camera. And they've took that scene from House on Haunted Hill of the doctors and nurses around this table, and then they all just look at the same time, and it's so scary. But in House on Haunted Hill, there's another scene that freaked me out, and it was when the owner of the house went to check on the CCTV cameras. Like, this is when shit's really getting crazy. People are getting killed off one by one. And the owner of this, like, it's not even a house. It's like a huge fucking skyscraper. It's huge. And he's like a billionaire, and he's like really rich and whatever. And he goes to check on the security cameras, and he's looking, and he sees the doctor who used to work at this old asylum. And the doctor's walking with this like weird jittery walk. And then he like pulls up this knife and looks directly into the security camera, and the fucking owner's like shitting himself at this point. And then the doctor starts walking like this again. He's got this like weird jittery walk. And I did actually find out, this is another fun fact, when they filmed that scene of the doctor doing that weird like jittery walk, they actually told him to walk backwards, and then they reversed the footage so it looked like he was walking forwards. But when you walk backwards, it kind of gives you like a weird like jittery walk, and they wanted him to do it like that so it looked even creepier, and fuck me, it worked. That was the scariest thing I've ever seen in my life, the way that doctor walked. It was just traumatizing. And there was one more scene which I found really, there's one that like really sticks out to me. And it was this guy, I think his name was Eddie, and he's walking around with this girl, and they're like all exploring this building, and he's again down in the basement somewhere. There's so many floors underneath that are like totally abandoned, and they're like walking around and investigating, and she gets separated from him. And then she thinks she's like she's starting to get panicked. She's freaking out a little bit. Then she thinks she sees him, so she's like running, and she's like, Eddie, Eddie, Eddie. But every time you see him, and it is him, it looks like him, but it's like something manifesting as him. It's not actually him. And she's like running after him, and he's just like walking away down the hallways, and she's running, following him. Then she sees him standing, and there's this huge like pool almost, and it's full of blood. And he goes up the steps, and he's like standing there, and she's like, Eddie, what are you doing? And then he just drops into this pool of blood. She screams, she's like, Eddie, and she runs over, and I remember her putting her arms in this huge tank of blood, and she's like trying to reach for him. And then the real Eddie comes up behind her and is like, what are you doing? And then as soon as she looks at him, something in the pool of blood starts trying to pull her in, and it's fucking so scary. I have another one, actually, just remembered. There's a scene when the owner of the house is in he's like dealing with the demons or whatever's going on in there too. Like the patients that used to be there have overtaken this hospital, the ghosts of the patients, and there's a lot of sinister things going on in this place. There's hundreds of like malevolent, evil entities going on, and they're like tormenting and killing off everybody. And there's one scene when the house owner ends up in this like weird sort of machine, and I don't know whether it's like a hypnosis thing or like it's some kind of thing for like the mentally insane people probably that they used to use. And I remember one thing very vividly. It was like he was thrown in there because I think he was blamed for what was going on and he had nothing to do with it. I remember that, and they put him in this like huge like time machine looking thing, lock him in there, and then the whole thing starts to like spin, and it's like black lines and white lines, and it's going around faster and faster and faster, so all he can see is like these things. And he puts on these goggles, these like, it looks like airplane goggles, like what those pilots used to wear over their eyes, like them things. I don't know what I really have to watch it again to understand it more, because I was a kid when I used to watch that. And I remember like he was seeing the doctor, I guess, of the hospital, just like standing there, and all these black and white lines were going around. I feel like if you have epilepsy, you couldn't watch that scene because it was very flashy, and it was going around faster. And I remember the sound effect was like ay 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 ah 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 ay 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 ah ah ah, and it was like super fucking scary. And I just remember that there was something that, like, he was like, or a little girl or somebody was bouncing a basketball as these white lines were going around, like it was like going around really fast. And she was like bouncing a basketball, and it was kind of like jittery, like when you flick through pages and you've done like a little drawing on each page and it looks like the person's walking, the little stick person. It was kind of like that with these lines going around. Every time it showed this girl, like a little girl, she was like bouncing a basketball, and it was coming up like this slowly and going back down again. And then it came up and again, and it was the homeowner, the guy who owns the house. It was his head in her hands, and she's like holding his head. And there was like a lot of weird scenes like that. And then there was one with like a weird sex swing that was like happening every now and then. It would like flash up on the scary parts. There was like a sex swing with a girl, like blood dripping out of her mouth, and she's like sort of seizing up. It looked like a sex swing. I'm sure it wasn't, but I remember thinking like that was fucking weird too. She was like naked, tits out and everything, blood dripping down her mouth, and she's like this. I guess she was like getting electrocuted or something because it was an asylum. But that was a movie that, like, I'm really getting overexcited if you guys can't tell. But that movie still, I remember the soundtrack more than anything. That movie was the most traumatic thing that I ever saw when I was a kid, and I remember genuinely having a hard time like sleeping after watching it. But I continued to do it to myself multiple times, and I feel like it really fucked me up to the point where like my way of thinking and my way of processing horror movies completely came to, like, I've matured faster than any normal kid should because I watched that movie. Like my fear of things really matured, and that's why I feel like I'm not afraid of anything anymore. I'm immune to horror movies now, and I think it was all thanks to House on Haunted Hill. That is the reason why I'm so messed up and I'm obsessed with this kind of stuff now. But anyway, guys, let me know in the comment section. I'm curious, what is like a horror movie that you watched as a kid that you really regret watching because it fucked you up, like it really traumatized you? I'm curious to hear, because I feel like I've seen a lot of horror movies and I want to see what messed you guys up. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you right back here in the next one. Peace out and chase your dreams.